Attention Span Labs recommends Wargames Atlantic. Hello and welcome to another episode of Attention Span Labs. I'm your host, Michael DiBaggio. And today is another episode of Attention Span Labs recommends. Now, these episodes, as I mentioned in the first one, they are entirely my opinion. They're not bought and paid for. All the things I'm going to show you here that I recommend to you were paid for with my own money. They were not given to me. No money was given to me to buy them. There was no, actually when I bought them, there wasn't much idea of doing any kind of review or recommendation for them. I bought them for my own purposes. So today I very heartily recommend to you what I think is one of, if not the best deals in miniature wargaming and also miniatures suitable for role-playing games, and that is Wargames Atlantic range. Wargames Atlantic is a company that operates both in the United States and in the UK. Their miniatures are designed in both countries, and they're distributed from both countries. So unlike a lot of miniature companies that are maybe from Europe or from America only, you're not paying exorbitant shipping, and you get them in a pretty good time. Now, the ones I'm going to show you today are both plastic kits, which you saw the boxes for in the intro, and we're also going to talk a bit about Atlantic Digital, which is Wargames Atlantic's offering through My Miniature Factory, which you can subscribe. I was a subscriber from the very beginning. I pay about $10 a month, and every month they release at least one set from each of their themed lines. As you can see in front of you, and this is just a small selection, you see Lizardmen, you see skeletons, you see Halflings, you see giant spiders, you see Conquistadors, Romans, Napoleonic English Riflemen, and many other things there. So that run the gamut from historicals to fantasy, science fiction, to other weird stuff. Stuff that you wouldn't think to find anywhere. And as I said, I really recommend them. I recommend them overall. No matter what set you're looking at, you probably can't go wrong with them. They're well designed, well proportioned. Some of the sets are harder to put together than others, especially, and this is a complaint I have in general with sets that involve particularly holding pikes and rifles and anything where there's two-handed and where they would hold the weapon two-handed, and it's not clear, both because of a lack of instructions and the layout of the sprue, which hand goes with which, and usually it really does matter what you have. So I have any complaints I have about the line in general are like that, and that doesn't apply to all sets. But just get this right off the bat. Some of the things I would caution you about with Wargames Atlantic is that some of the sets could be served with some kind of instruction sets, or at least a labeling of the sprues to say which arm goes with what. Now, that may be available online. I don't know. I didn't check. I'm not the kind of guy that reads instructions. I've been building models for a long time, so I pretty much get a feel how they put together. But certain ones, like you can see the Conquistadors there. Actually, the Conquistadors that I have pictured there, they were pretty. But other ones that are carrying rifles or something, or the spiders in particular were quite an adventure to put together. The first spider it took me like an hour to put together, but after that, you get used to it. And the only other thing I would complain about is with Atlantic Digital, where many of the supported options, I would not even bother with the supported options because they almost always fail to print. The support, I don't know who designs the supports on them, but they need quite a bit of work on there. But that's okay. I support my own miniatures. It's very easy to do when I'm printing them in resin, especially like for G2 box, or whatever you're using. That any good slicing software should be able to put the supports in the right place, and with a little bit of experience, you'll figure that out. That aside, I have no other complaints about Wargames Atlantic. The miniatures are excellent. They satisfy a lot of needs that are not met elsewhere, or that, I mean, you can see I have an Orthodox priest in there. Who makes those? Right? Who makes good Lizardmen carrying radium rifles? Not too many. Not too many places. The other thing I would say is that for the price is amazing. The in an era of Games Workshop charging $45 for a single miniature, you get the first set I got was my box of Halflings, and the Halflings come with. Let me check the box here. 40 Halflings. They're multi-part, hard plastic, and I paid $28 for it. Now they're a bit more expensive now, but $28 for 40 multi-part Halflings, you can't beat it. This really is the best deal in miniature wargaming. So what we're going to do now is we'll go through some of the sets by theme. We'll take a closer look at the. Unfortunately, I don't have all the ones I'm going to show you are not painted, but at least I do have samples assembled from every box, and then a very small selection of the Atlantic Digital, which I'll show you as well. And we'll do that in just a second. Okay, the first set we'll take a look at. We'll try to do these in chronological order in the order in which I bought them, and not necessarily assembled and painted them. But these are my Halflings, and I also include this set, this horse-drawn carriage in the back, which is actually part of the Wargames Atlantic Digital series on my mini factory. And I include it only because it can be used for a variety of time periods, obviously, but I think it's especially suitable for fantasy, and it comes with a halfling teamster. So these are the set, as I mentioned. I paid $28 for them. They were a small discount on what they normally are. I think they were going for like $34 or something like that. And you get 40 miniatures, and they come with a huge variety of different heads. One of the strengths of the Wargames Atlantic line in general is the large amount of heads they come with. You will have many more heads left over. You have a very large variety, all kinds of different helmets, from knight helmets to forgive me, I'm not Shad or any of these other YouTubers. I don't know what most of these helmets are called, but you have the kind of medieval archer helmet with the wide brim. You have the knights with the full helm, great helm with the slits. You have the helmets with the nose pieces. I have the sort of Roman legionnaire style helmets, like on this one. Ones with peacock feathers. So large variety. You got the Robin Hood. Whoops. Oh. Strong magnets in those. All right, so got the Robin Hood types, the Errol Flynn caps. If anybody knows what they're called, let me know in the comments. Huge variety of weapons. You got halberds. You got banner poles. You got daggers. You got slings. You got short bows. You got long pikes. There are probably more, but very, very good for representing you can see I painted mine they're not uniform. I started painting them uniform. I was like, it's not as cool looking if they're not a little bit different. And they're called Halfling Militia, so I imagine them as sort of like the Bounders and the Shire or something like that. And they're organized with what they have. They provide themselves, and there's not necessarily a focus on having a uniform appearance with equipment, with the color of their quilted vests, their gambesons, and their tunics, and so forth. But yeah, these are great. I love them. They're all the miniatures I'm going to look at today are 28mm scale, and that is mostly what Wargames Atlantic does. They're starting to branch into other scales now, but these would be suitable for, they're not as bulky and disproportioned as your classic Warhammer style, but they look fine with them. But these would be good for D&D, Pathfinder, probably the Lord of the Rings battle game, if I'm correct, and that is 28mm. It might be a little smaller than that, but these are pretty well proportioned. Even for they have furry feet. Let's see, I'm going to show you one with furry feet here. Yeah. So they're well textured. They got little bits you can add on them, like canteens and pouches and knife sheaths. Let's take a look at this 3D printed horse-drawn carriage. And yes, it came with the horses, the driver, and very You can see the driver's drunk, or he's looking at his mug, trying to get some more booze out of it. And these were simply painted. This one was simply painted with contrast paints. Took it. You see the wood grain texture. Took it very easily. And these are, printed separately. They're removable. You can stack them as much as you want. And there's other pieces on this that you could add on. And there's 3 different type of wagons. This is from the Fantasy Caravan set, which, by the way, I talk about Atlantic Digital, and I'm a subscriber. I pay $10 a month. I think it's a great deal. But if you only want specific sets, you can buy specific sets there in STL form. And this print without any problems. Like I said, I don't use their own supports. I use my own supports because their supports are generally not to be trusted as of the making of this video. Okay. Now let's move on to the Lizardmen. And here they are. The Lizardmen are interesting. They're packaged in a classic fantasy line, but they have a surplus, I would say, firearms, which is okay for fantasy, but they also have like Kalashnikov-style weapons and, John Carter of Mars radium rifles and things like that. And in fact, on the back of the box, they are depicted as, in one picture, as Venusian colonial auxiliaries for the British in like a Space 1889 campaign. It doesn't say Venusian, but I assume typically Lizardmen are from Venus. You see that there. Oops. Oh, I'm sorry about that. Didn't want that light to kick on. But one of the hallmarks of Wargames Atlantic, especially the sort of fantasy and sci-fi sets, is that they're both. They come with both sci-fi and fantasy parts, so they can be used. So the Lizardmen, these Lizardmen, the ones I've painted, I use as my German colonial auxiliaries from German Pellucidar in Conflict 47, and like the weird war games. They're Horibs. They represent Horibs, the Lizardmen from one of the types of Lizardmen from Edgar Rice Burroughs' Pellucidar. And so they have Sturmgewehrs. Some of them have gas masks. But they also have native rifles like this one. And then there's larger... So there's like flintlock type rifles, muzzle loading rifles. There's like Lizardmen native rifles that are... I think of them as like the Martian radium rifles from John Carter, the Kalashnikovs. They're fun to paint in a variety of ways. Here's one with a gas mask. But if you want them just for pure fantasy, they do have options for that as well. These two that I do not have painted, just primed, they have spears, and there's ones with swords too. But one thing I will say is that for pure fantasy, that if you don't want any guns, the sprue is a little under-equipped for that. I think that there is just enough spears and swords to equip each Lizardman on the sprue, and I think that they come four or five, I don't remember, to a sprue. And but they don't have a lot of variety in terms of pure close combat weapons. That's okay because they're Lizardmen. So their tails are also a separate piece. Yeah, so these are all, again, multi-part models. Some of them that they have, you can see the different heads. That one has like a gecko type head with the eyes popping out the side. There's heads with the spikes on the back and horns on the front, as you can sort of see there. There's ones with no horns at all, like this one. They have other bits, interesting bits like Lizardman binoculars, and these were really well thought out, I thought, because I zoom in on that. You can see those binoculars are made for the Lizardman eyes. The eye holes are spread apart. They're extended to deal with their snout. It was a very good design choice. And generally, you're just going to be painting their skin for the most part because they're just wearing a loincloth. They're wearing some straps, and you can put some pouches on them, sword sheaths, and so forth. Take Take a look at their spears. These are great for any kind of fantasy. They'd be great for Frostgrave, especially Frostgrave Ghost Archipelago. They're very good for Stargrave, which is what I initially started using them for. Like I said, I used them in the Weird War campaign. Used them in a Victorian sci-fi retro steampunk space adventure on Venus or Mars or wherever you want them. Definitely, pretty much anything. These are one of the most versatile sets, the Lizardmen. They also, their sci-fi line is called the Death Fields, I think. Is that correct? Yes, it is, Death Fields. And it's basically like, you know, it's a 40K style competitor, but they're, the idea is that there's this televised series where different factions from different races and time periods fight each other with sci-fi weapons. And that's what some of these are also made for. We'll talk about a bit more of them. I don't have any of those in box sets, but I do have several of them in the Atlantic digital prints, which we'll talk about in a minute. But next, onto the skeletons. And here are some very nice Wargames Atlantic multi-part plastic skeletons. You can see the very strong Ray Harryhausen influence on them. If you've ever seen Jason the Argonauts or Voyages of Sinbad. This, I think, was the first of their fantasy lines they came out with, not the first I bought. But they hold up very well. So they're several years old now, but they a lot of variety of weapons. They got swords. Oh, I don't have any pictured here. And I'll tell you why in a minute. But they got spears, javelins. They're very Greek in theme, as you can tell. They got horns, although I don't know how a skeleton blows a horn. But if a skeleton can walk around without anything holding its bones together or no muscles to move it, I'm sure it can blow a horn as well. So the reason I do have, oh, here's another one. Put them in the back here. I do have a couple sword-armed ones, and I just don't have them here right now because last night as I was bringing them out, one point of caution with these are you should be able to use like model glue with these, but there's not enough point of contact unless you want to hold it for quite a bit. So use super glue, except for the heads, and I unfortunately used regular glue, I think, on one of their heads last night. As I was bringing them out, I dropped it, and it hit the floor, and it popped off, and that head flew somewhere in my room. And there's all kinds of little, courtesy of my son Victor, there's all kinds of rocks from my scenery creation and basing kits that are strewn all over the floor, and they're about the same color and size as the skeleton head, so I have not found it yet. Of course, I have, as I said, tons of heads there, plenty more, but these are very... these you get to the box 32, and they're all about the same price, so I like them. They're great. They're super easy to paint especially if you want to do contrast or something like that. It takes no time at all, and you can spend as much time as you want prettying them up. But yeah, a variety of different shields, spear lengths. Not too much a huge variety of heads. We're mainly in whether they're tight jawed or they're opening their mouth to scream. These are a very good set, essential for any fantasy. They would be great for Frostgrave, for Warhammer Fantasy. What are the other fantasy games out there? Kings of War. I think they'd be perfect for that. On to the giant spiders. So these giant spiders I really love, but I will say that of all the Wargames Atlantic sets that I had problems with putting together, these were the worst. As I said, the very first one I built took me an hour, and I kind of ruined it. I didn't realize there are no instructions. You kind of have to look at the box, and I sort of put the front pincer mandible things. They're not really mandibles. They're like an extra set of, they're like very short claws. I omitted them entirely and sort of put the legs in the wrong order. So I have to dissolve the glue on that one and get back to work. But once you get in the sort of, in the swing of things, putting these together, in the spider swing of things, that's no pun intended, they come out very, very cool. And they have this really, the things you can do with positioning their legs so that they're kind of coming out on top of each other, and they're really creepy, and they have that very evocative. They're stretching out in different like asymmetrical directions. Very, as I depicted them here, moving over rocks and so forth, like very rough terrain. They have that very much Hobbit movie vibe, the creepy or Shelob vibe as it's crawling over things, and one leg is kind of tumbling over the other. You don't see that very often, if at all, in other giant spider miniatures. But the trade-off, of course, is you don't have to build them. And these are multi-parts, so you're going to have for each spider 8 legs. These 2 front pincers will go on in different positions. You have their head, main body, and the thorax. And there is a stinger at the end. Now, those are the large ones. Each sprue also comes with. So each sprue comes with two of these larger spiders, and then 2 of these smaller but still quite giant spiders. And you can see them in size by size comparison. Those are about the size of a hobbit, and they, here's one against a Roman. They're still very big. I like these a lot, and as I mentioned, the obvious thing is fantasy, but I did mention that they have a sci-fi adjustments for like little bits that you can add on for pretty much all of their fantasy sets, and that the same is true for the spiders. And there's one right there. I haven't painted him. I'm not sure how I'm going to paint him, but there he is. There's a spider with a laser gun. He has, can you see here? He has face armor, like some kind of cybernetic attachment to his face. I believe he has a bionic leg somewhere. Oh yeah, that front leg there, it's a bionic leg. So there's all kinds of stuff you can do with them to make them sci-fi. These would be great for Starship Troopers, if anybody still plays Starship Troopers game, or has a Starship Troopers theme game with other miniatures. I think they'd be perfect for that purpose. If you wanted to refight the Battle of Murder in like the pre-Horus Heresy era, it would be great for that purpose. They make awesome enemies in Stargrave. Yeah, I really like the sci-fi ones. I have to build a few more of them. Okay, now on to some historicals. Here are the miniatures from one sprue of the Wargames Atlantic Napoleonic English Rifleman range. And if they look familiar to you, you're not mistaken, you're not hallucinating. Do they remind you of anybody? I'll give you a hint. King George commands and we obey, over the hills and far away. That's right, they're modeled after the Sharpe's Rifles character, at least some of them are. There's Sharpe right there. Sean Bean, pretty fair likeness. There's the Irishman, Sergeant Harper, with his, whatever you call that gun. That multi-barrel. What kind of gun? It's not a shotgun. Like a pepper box, but a rifle. So that you can make, there's more torsos than there are legs in this sprue. So you have quite a variety of things. And the only one that takes a different torso is the standing one. There's like 3 other torso options. The rest of them are single piece poses, but as far as the legs and torso, many different heads, as I said, and different arm configurations. These are the British Rifleman set. I'm actually working on a kind of imagination style, not alternate history, but Weird War, parallel Earth fantasy kind of thing that is set from, well, set is the wrong word, but it's set in a time period that's roughly similar to from, say, the 7 Years' War to the Napoleonic War, pre-industrial revolution, that era. So I probably will not paint these up as a particular historical army. As I mentioned before, the historicals people get mad. Not that I care about that really, but you know, I like painting my my own color schemes. If I don't like the way things turn out, you know, I don't you know really care if someone wants to complain about it. That's their business. They don't have an imagination. Thaddeus. But you know, I liked. I'm sort of thinking as something reminiscent of, you know, the nondescript, non-specified Middle European Germanic country that is the setting of all the Hammer horror Frankenstein movies. Something like the or you know the Dark Shadow 1797 sequence, but with orcs and wolf riders and stuff. So I'll paint them something like that. I'm not too interested in buying 50 more books and looking up the proper uniform colors. Now, because the other problem I have, of course, these are British Riflemen, so they should be mostly green, but I have a variety. I also have from Wargames Atlantic's Atlantic Digital, I have Bavarian troops. I have, and I think I have Austrian and Spanish troops that I bought at Cold Wars. So they're not from the same country anyway, but I kind of want to use them all in the same force. I also have from Silver Bayonet, this is neither here nor there, but I have Silver Bayonet Russian force. So, you know, I want to make them my own thing. That's what I intend to do with them. I want to make them my own sort of fantasy, quasi-historical stuff. But these are a very good set. As I said, now this is the only set I don't have the box set for. At the HMGS conventions, there's usually a seller there that will allow you, instead of buying the box, for any of the Wargames Atlantic or the North Star military figures box sets, to pay only $5 or $6 to take a whole sprue out, instead of buying the whole box for $30. And if you just want to sort of get an idea how the figures look before you buy a whole box, or you don't need a whole box, that's definitely the way to go. Okay, we're going to go on to some more historicals now. Romans, late Roman legionary troops, and conquistadors. And here are the late Roman legionary in Lorica Hama armor. Let me turn some of them so that you're not just seeing their shields. These would be around sort of the fall of the Western Empire time, early so-called Byzantine time. You know, with Aetius fighting Attila, the Battle of Adrianople, that sort of thing. I don't see why they could not also be used in Dark Ages Arthurian style fights. There's gladiuses, Roman style swords, but they're mostly spears, and they're very heavily. You know, there's but like, I don't know if they still use pila at that time, but some of them have like spears of throwing, but they're also heavily oriented towards, as you can see on the backs of their shields, and then they're of the martial barbuli, or if you prefer, the plumbata, the plumbatorii. But these are, I don't think plumbatorii were a real distinct unit. I think the pila was kind of going out of favor in favor of these smaller lead-weighted darts. But as I said, this is the Lorica Hama style armor. Once again, variety of different helmet styles. You can see here the peaked type, more reminiscent of medieval. These broad shields that are depicted with this beautiful Cairo, the XP. I know it's not really an XP, but the, you know, what I'm talking about here. But unfortunately, there's no decals. No decals in the box, so you're going to have to freehand them or buy those decals yourself. As I said, swordsman, spearman, plumbatorii is a legionary standard bearer with a wolf's headdress. There's a, what do you call this? Cornicular, the guy with the horn. Cornicularius. Very nicely detailed. You got a lot of. Should be pretty simple to paint. I don't know, I haven't actually painted them, but they just got some straps and pouches, and then the mail and the helmet and the shield, and they're actually wearing. They're wearing like boots, not sandals. Yeah, this is a very good set. This set you get 24 24 multi-part miniatures. Again, large variety of poses and equipment for about $30. Let's look at the Conquistadors. So there is one other thing that kind of bothers me about Wargames Atlantic, is that they do send review miniatures to people that are completely unworthy of them. And I was unfortunate enough to read a review of these Conquistadors on the absolutely awful Goonhammer site. And Goonhammer is just, God, they're even worse than Spiky Bits. Just the biggest bunch of queers like on the planet. Like, they spent the first paragraph talking about how, problematic. I mean, that was the exact words, that these are problematic because of the native genocide. And, that's right up there with, the, what's his name, Midwinter Minis, and it's like, if you play Germans, you're a Nazi kind of stuff. Like, these people they're not real war gamers. They're stupid fantasy. They're Warhammer bozos, and they have no problem playing their genocidal fantasy or sci-fi armies or anything. But they will absolutely talk down to you and call you a Nazi and a fascist because you have a conquistador army or World War II German army, or really anything they don't like, and which is rapidly evolving to the point that every historical is tainted, because Americans are bad, they wiped out the Indians, the British are bad, even though they basically ended slavery. So I do dislike that they, I don't know why you'd send miniatures to someone who is going to start out the review by attacking your choice of models and calling into question your very humanity. But we don't worry about that here, because in this house we believe that God has rights and men have duties, that the New World legally belongs to Spain and Portugal, the gospel is real, Hernan Cortez is one of the greatest men in history, and devil-worshipping, human-sacrificing Aztec lives don't matter. And that's why I got these Conquistadors. It's a very fascinating period of history, and I would love to play. I would love to play in that kind of thing. They have an Aztec warband too that they can fight. But of course, these are perfect for European battles as well during that era. And the other obvious thing, and probably the reason why they even gave them to those morons at Goonhammer, or that, what do they look like to you if you don't know much about history, but you know about Warhammer Fantasy, the old world. They're imperial troops, they're empire troops, who are clearly modeled on like 1500s Holy Roman Empire types, which of course was part of the Habsburg crown with Spain and everything during that time. So these they could not just fighting in the world, it could be fighting in Europe, fighting they could make up a Spanish tercio. They have great swords, a huge variety of weapons. Again, you got the long 6-foot pikes, you got halberds and great axes, you got crossbows, you got great swords, you got what's that? It's not a rapier. Boy, I need to know more about identify my weapons at a glance. But the short pointed swords, you got firelock rifles, matchlock rifles. You got the Morion helmets, the classic peaked brimmed conquistador helmets like him. You got people wearing those poofs or berets, I forget what they're called. You got these other, keep falling down here. So these come on puddle bases. You will want to mount them on your own bases, obviously. A variety of different helmets, as you can see. These were a little hard to put together because of for the sets that had arms that matched. And one was, where you had to put the rifle starting in one hand and the other hand in the other. It was not obvious which one goes with which. So, but still, very good set. They're beautiful looking. They will paint up well. They have lots of nice textures. They have like the quilted. Some of them have breastplates, and others have the quilted padded armor. But these would be great for obviously the historical setting that they're designed for, but also if you want to get into the old world Warhammer fantasy stuff without buying any of their miniatures. All right, we're almost done the review, so let's go on to some of the sci-fi ones, some of the Death Fields, and then also so all the Death Fields ones I have are from the Atlantic Digital, so I'm going to show you just a few of them just next. Okay, so I very foolishly did not base any of these miniatures, and some of them they're just going to have to lay down because they won't stand on their own. But these are miniatures that I printed out from the Atlantic Digital. As you can see, the Orthodox priest here. There's a variety of them. They also have Catholic priests and friars with 45. Some of them have 1911s, which is very cool. But of course, the priests are good for like any era at all in history. They look the same today as they did 2,000 years ago. The Orthodox ones, anyway. They're printed on my resin printer. This is from the Grognard cavalry set. The Grognards is one of the sci-fi. They're obviously based on French Napoleonics, and they have a plastic set of infantry. And this cavalry set is also coming out soon in plastic. But these are first released digital, and these were hard to print. I've only printed out a couple of them successfully in terms of their actually having all their legs and stuff. But obviously they're a sci-fi thing. They would be great as Rough Rider proxies. They're in the more heroic scale, as you see, compared to say like they're the same size, same 28 millimeter. But like if you compare them to the English Riflemen or something like that, or the like the Roman, they look a little. The real proportion one looks a little scrawny, and they have larger heads, so they're very much intended to be used with Warhammer style armies. But the other thing is that, so these ones are not 3D printed. They're horses from their general accoutrements line, and you get 18 multi-part hard plastic horses, and but this one was 3D printed. But if you wanted to, you could just print like the extra armor and the barding and stuff and put them on these horses. So definitely recommend checking them out if you need some Rough Riders. And they're as a Napoleonic Imperial Guard army, they'd work very good for a Space Mace 69. Let's see what else we got here. These are also from the Death Fields line. These are the Valkyries, and you would think these would be hard to print, but these actually came out very, very good. This one I broke its sword off, but they have lots of. I had to support them myself. Again, don't trust their supports. But they got like this spindly weapons and the spiky wings. Here's another one. I think there's like 10 different poses for these. You get quite a lot. This is an all-female force that's related to their other Death Fields army called the Einherjar, which are they're basically squats, and they're really. I don't have them, but I've seen them. They make excellent squats. So if you're looking for squats, check out the Wargames Atlantic Einherjar. But there's some sort of backstory lore how they're related to them. Yeah. All right, and these are my favorites so far. Also from the Death Fields. These are the Rebel Yell. And these are, oh, that's a bad focus. Let's see if we can focus on that. No, of course, because they're gray, it's not going to show them too well. But you get some very nice detail on these. There's a Rebel Yell, which is like a Confederate sci-fi army. And these are the female figures from that line. I thought they were cute. That's the only reason why I printed them. I don't think women should actually fight in combat. No. I don't think they would be effective in fighting in combat. I think they're too valuable to fight in combat. But, hey look, I'm just guaranteeing that no one's ever going to send me miniatures because of my politically incorrect thoughts here. But at least I'm not Goonhammer. At least I'm not Goonhammer or Spiky Bits, or what's the other one? Bell of Lost Souls, right? Awful. All these shill websites. And they come with, they come with the kepis, obviously, but they also come with some interesting helmets. I had hoped to use these as Confederate troops for my Weird War, the Conflict 47, which is actually sort of diverges well before World War One. Obviously, if there's Confederates, but the World War One ends very differently in that, and that's why so I wanted to give the Germans and Japanese a sort of chance to win against the Americans, British and Russians, and they just don't have the industrial capacity to do that. So I proposed an alternate history. Yeah, so those are the Confederate Rebel Yell women, and there are so many more miniatures that are out there. Oh, one thing I want to tell you, so that the spiders can also be, since I picked them up here to show you the size comparison, there's a goblin pack, and the goblins come with a seat in each screw. There's like a seated rider and a saddle that you can put on the giant spiders to have them ride them. But you obviously you can combine these if you're creative and imaginative enough. You can have sci-fi ones fighting fantasy ones, and why not? You can go on a big bug hunting safari, hunt giant spiders, hunt lizardmen. But I really recommend the Wargames Atlantic line. I think they're fantastic. I don't have all of them, obviously. They have a very large selection now, many different themes. But I recommend Atlantic Digital, trying it. If you have a 3D printer, if you know anything about 3D printing, you get such a good deal, such a large variety of items every month. And, there's a lot of stuff that you just won't find anywhere. They have, like, naval troopers, Napoleonic era captain, but, the sea captains that are like Russell Crowe and Master and Commander, just like the other one's based off Sharpe. That you have German sea battalions from World War One, U.S. Navy landing parties from World War II in like the interwar period, Sam Peebles era. There's orcs. There's space frogs with, armored power armor frogs with particle beams. You really have to check it out. You don't have to subscribe. As I said, you can order stuff individually, but I think subscribing is the best deal. I don't know if you subscribe now if you get the past months. I don't know how that works. But I was in from the beginning, and it was totally worth it. And I don't, always print them out every month, but I do download them and save them for the future. And huge variety of stuff. Just from the historical stuff that they make. Like I said, the Aztecs, the Boxers from the Boxer Rebellion, the Deathfield stuff with British from the Space 1889 period. There's the German Raumjäger. They're obviously based in the Fallschirmjäger, but that are also excellent proxies for Armageddon Steel Legion. The Einherjar for the squats, as I mentioned. Worth checking out. There's more than I can possibly go through in any of these videos, but I hope you will take my recommendation. Look at them. They're a company worth supporting. They care what the fans think. They run little polls to see what they should produce next. So yeah, check out wargamesatlantic.com and then on My Mini Factory for their 3D prints. And if you like this video, give it a like, a thumbs up. Tell me what you think about these minis in the comments. If there's a particular line I didn't cover that you want to recommend for a future video, or if there's a Wargames Atlantic line that you want me to check out next that you think I would love to hear about it in the comments. So subscribe and tell your friends, and hopefully you'll be back for the next Attention Span Labs Recommends. This is Attention Span Labs signing off.